Barlane defeated no more. You're tuned into the lounge on WURD Radio 96.1 FM, 900 AM. It's 9:09 PM. I am your host, Sincerely Sarita, and we are in the home stretch, y'all. The show tonight on this here Motivation Monday, and it's time to get to our Man Crush Monday segment. And I'm really excited. I haven't seen this guy in a while, and it's just so fitting that like his shape up is like so fresh and his locks are popping. Like, I'm excited just to even chat with him right now. Michael O'Brien, he's the program manager at the Village of Arts and Humanities. How you doing?
I'm pretty good, love. How are you?
I'm good. I'm trying to think of like the last time I saw you. I want to say, I don't know, Leadership Philadelphia. Yeah. Shout out to Leadership Philadelphia.
Shout out to Leadership.
We were both in the same cohort at Leadership Philadelphia, which was like, for me, a really great experience to just getting to connect with, like, seriously, so many amazing leaders in the city of Philly.
Yeah, and our age group, too.
Yeah,
which I
in
really
our age group.
appreciate it, right?
Yeah, so what you been up to?
I have been working. I'm a little bit nonstop. You know, since Leadership, I was lucky to land some fellowships that are supporting me in work I've been doing around workforce development and connecting it to this public health and trauma work. So that's been really rewarding and cool, because there was a time about 4 or 5 years ago, there were people in the city that were like, I don't know if anybody's going to care about that. It might be a waste of time. And luckily, I didn't listen. You know, so,
right? Because trauma-informed care and just trauma theory in general is like, finally, there's more focus being put on it.
Yeah, there's a whole lane for that. And, you know, I'm also trying to make sure we open up that lane too. You know, it's this balance with buzzwords, right? So everything now is trauma informed, and it's almost becoming like a checkbox, right? Like, oh, I took a training, I'm trauma informed. I'm like, wow. You know, like really what we're talking about is like being informed about humanity. Yeah. And that's not it. You can't check enough boxes for that. You can't take enough workshops for that. So, you know, there's a little, I'm doing some rebranding, I think, you know, like I try to talk about myself these days more as a developmentalist, or even like with LinkedIn, like I mention trauma theory because it's something people know and it's a buzz term. But then the other flip side of that is like I talk about human flourishing and thriving, right? Like that's the other side is about what about growth after trauma? What about the growth prior to trauma or growth during trauma, right? Like there's a whole range of human experience that I'm just trying to make sure we are aware of, and the impacts of our experiences with each other that I'm trying to make sure people are aware of. Yeah.
Congratulations on those fellowships.
Thank you very much. Oh, I should probably name them because I'll get yelled at if I don't. You know, so one is at Drexel University, the Lindy Institute for Urban Innovation. I'm an Urban Innovation Fellow there. And then the University of the Arts has a center called the Corzo Center for the Creative Economy. They really support artists and creatives going into whatever fields they want to and start doing like startup work and starting a business. So I'm a Corzo Fellow there, and they're supporting me starting this business too. And I'm at the Village. Doing comparable work. You know?
You're getting it done out here.
I'm trying. It's hard work. It takes a million of us,
You're doing. You're doing. You know? It's a process.
It is a process.
So, because I feel like you said, trauma informed is definitely this buzzword. I also think a lot of folks are just really starting to even come to understand trauma in general and being trauma informed. So when we're saying trauma theory, can you kind of break that down for those of us who are new to that concept?
Absolutely. So trauma theory is the bodies of knowledge that have come together to build the science around our understanding of what happens to human beings and to systems that human beings, you know, ideate, think of, power, and operationalize. Like what happens to them when they're exposed to chronic stress, what happens to them when they're exposed to situations that bring out really intense feelings of terror, helplessness, a lack of control, whether they're emotional or physical threats that bring those things out. Like trauma theory looks at, again, what happens to us individually and collectively. You know, there's other branches of knowledge like terror management theory. Terror management theory looks at or is the study of what happens to people when they live under the threat of imminent death. And unfortunately, you know, this breadth of work or science was really interesting to me because of the work that I was doing back at 21 and 22, working with different populations, like migrant farm working populations. I taught art, thanks to this program called Artists Striving to End Poverty. I was teaching art down in Miami-Dade County on some migrant farm working camps for the young people who lived in that region. And you know, it was an eye-opening experience to see people terrified of law enforcement in a different way, right? They're terrified of immigration, right? On top of being terrified of the police, right? Because of the relationships within the world of law enforcement. So, like, thinking about, like, dang, what is it like to feel like my life could be over any minute, but just through a whole other cultural context was wide open, eye-opening for me. And so it just led me down this path of study. And then I learned about trauma theory more so when I was back in Philly working at the Red Shield Family Residence, learning about that experience learning about the experience of trauma through housing insecurity, through not having basic needs met, through having to navigate systems that were not set up for your well-being, and particularly are anti-black and brown, right? Like, if we're just going to name it and keep it real. So, you know, that's where a lot of my interest in this came from. And I have a family history, like many folks living in Philly and other parts of the country. I have a family history that includes lots of trauma intergenerationally, right? I think to be black in America is kind of to harbor intergenerational trauma, right? You know, so a lot of interest for me in pushing me into reading about this stuff and why.
Yeah. So how did this intersection of trauma theory and art kind of come into play in your life? Yeah,
so for me, I think I've always seen art as a healer. You know, like, I don't practice Christianity anymore. I respect everybody's religious choices, but I don't practice Christianity anymore. But I grew up in a very, very, very Christian household, and church is like saturated with art and music, and I saw music move people. I remember my mom was listening, and I know she's going to remember this moment. I remember watching, like, Michael Jackson in concert, like, on TV, being like 3 or 4, and, like, commenting to my mom about, like, oh snap, the people got the Holy Ghost. You know, like, I was stumbling out, but it also confused me, because I was like, but you're not singing about God. This ain't church, but the people acting just like they were in church. And, you know, I don't really remember what my mother said to me. Sorry, Mom. Love you much. But I do remember that being the first time that I recognized that art and music were bigger than a religion. It was bigger than one artist. It was bigger than an industry. Like, there was something powerful and palpable and impactful, and people clearly some people were crying, some people are laughing and screaming, right? So there's this range of emotional experience to me, and that was my opening. And, like, as I got older, I never let go of that, and I kept exploring it through going to art high. I went to a performing arts high school in Connecticut, and then came to UArts for music. And so it was always this through line of, like, looking back at the ancient world, really looking at the indigenous world, and seeing how art and ritual and cultural practice were used for healing and for mourning and for joy. And, you know, the older I got, I would do deeper digs, being my nerdy self, you know, going through, like, the anthropological digs, and, like, wow, man, like, black people, African folks sang. There was a song when you walked up the road to the hunt. There was a song when you came back, right? There was a song that women would sing when they were teaching other young women how to get involved with some, like, the corn separating. I mean, like, I was just fascinated at what I was finding. So art was just part and parcel of life before it was industrialized. And that really is where this came from. It's like, wow, well, how could we in the 21st century learn from our past and adopt things from the past, but also look at creating our own sense of new ritual to be handing down. And also, you know, going back to black and brown folks, like, our ancestors who were prisoners of war and made into slaves, they had practices too around mourning and healing and work songs, right? Like, things that would help them keep getting through the day, or things that would help them find joy or find strength to continue moving forward, right? We didn't have the science back then to study it. Right. And even if they did, they weren't going to do that with us, right? Because you had to deny our humanity to keep us subjugated. It's
counterproductive.
So yeah, so that's really where the interest came from, and how I've been, like, looking at it, still today.
Got you. Listen, loves, if you're just tuning in, I'm chatting with Michael O'Brien. He's a program manager at the Village of Arts and Humanities, and clearly just, slaying in life on so many other aspects. He's, two fellowships and really just out here doing the good work of art for youth, trauma theory, and also serving as an advocate for human rights and social change. Michael, you mentioned new rituals for art as healing. Yeah. And I'm curious on your thoughts as far as what are some new rituals, or your ideas on some new rituals that we can, and when I say we, I mean the Black community in particular, given our experience, especially with us coming up on 400 years of enslavement, what those new rituals might be. So we're going to get to that when we come back after break, and then also just kind of delve a little deeper into the work that you do and all of that good stuff. Yeah. So, loves, you're tuned in to The Lounge on WURD Radio 96.1 FM, 900 AM. It's 9:20. We'll take this break. I'm your host, Sincerely Sarita, and we'll be right back after these messages.
Philly, D.C., and everything in between. Reality Check with Charles Ellison. Breaking down the latest in local and national news. Monday through Thursday, 4 p.m. till 7 p.m. Right here on onWURD Radio.
This is the story of a very special woman. In a matter of seconds, she turned herself into a great mathematician or an entrepreneur. Her knowledge was limitless and still is. She could also make monsters disappear, especially those that lurked in the shadows under the bed. Once, this woman put back together a teenage girl's broken heart, which had been shattered in 1,000 pieces, just by giving her a bear hug. She masqueraded as a regular person at work, but as a superhero at home. Everyone knows her as Gabriella. I still call her Mom.
Your hero needs you now, and AARP is here to help. Find the care guides you need to help, complete with tips and resources at aarp.org/caregiving. A public service announcement brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
Listen live at wordradio.com.
The Sweet Treat Hut is the highest-rated juice bar in Philly, located on the corner of 50th and Thompson Streets, providing delicious, healthy vegan food, juices, and smoothies. Treat yourself to a cup of happiness. Call 215-877-1471.
Word TV. We're streaming live video of this conversation right now. Tune in on YouTube at onWURD or on Facebook at forward. Word TV. Black Talk Media. The Lounge with Sincerely Sarita. Sincerely Sarita. Right now on onWURD Radio.
bothering about what men may say. When in 5 years none of our people have died, and there's never been a casket rolled through people's temple. When 24 times in this year, and the year's not out, they've brought the dead in the doors, and they've gone out alive. When they've dropped dead in their seats, they've been resurrected. I'm not bothering about what you have to say. I'm not bothering about your opinion. I'm living in the actual conscious presence of God.
This Purple Disco Machine, My House, that's an original mix. You're tuned in to the lounge on WURD Radio, 96.1 FM, 900 AM. I am your host, Sincerely Sarita. It's 9:26 p.m. And I have the pleasure of being joined in studio with Michael O'Brien. He's a program manager at the Village of Arts and Humanities. I want to take a moment to shout out all those folks who are tuning in via our onWURD TV, Facebook Live. Y'all know, if you haven't already, make sure you head to Word Radio's Facebook page to not only like that, but to tune in, you know, for all those folks who are visual and you like to see us in studio and really feel like you're joined into the conversation. Hey, y'all, all that good stuff. So, Michael, prior to break, you had mentioned new rituals, right? And Loves, just to catch you up to date, Mike's on air with us to kind of discuss art as healing, right, especially for youth, but also trauma theory and the experience of being a black man serving as an advocate for human rights and social change. And so, and what you were sharing prior to break, it was, you know, some new rituals for the use of art as healing. And I was curious to get your take on what are some new rituals that we use?
I mean, part of it, excuse me, part of the newness is actually rediscovery for us, right? Because we don't need to throw away good things, right? The flip side of that too is like we also don't know the full extent of like what's there and what's available. So sometimes the newness is actually doing the digging and the research and then learning from it, seeing the prototype and then going, how do I pull this forward into the 21st century, right? So an example that's actually not art, but I think it deals with young people and can include art. So the Dagara tribe out of Burkina Faso, which is like northwestern Africa, they have a method of youth development they call inviting the genius out. So actually, you can read about this in a really great book called The Healing Wisdom of Africa by a guy named Patrice Malidoma Somé. He has another great book, which is more autobiographical of his journey, called Of the Water and the Spirit. Two great books. But he describes this journey of inviting the genius out, which allows for every young person born into the community to be connected to mentorship and a mentor that is specifically picked based on the gifts and attributes that the young person is displaying. And that person, so it can be the chief, it can be like the top of the hierarchy, or it can be, you know, and I'm not big on hierarchy, but, you know, it could be the person that we don't consider the highest on the hierarchy, right? It doesn't matter who it is, that young person has that other person as a mentor and has access to them. And they have that access until they say the genius of the child is fully invited out and it is fully integrated into the community. And the job is not done until it is integrated. So it can come out, be cultivated, but if it is not integrated into the community and into the society, then the job is not done. What a fascinating idea and concept, right? And that is something we can definitely pull forward and use today as this ritual around development and access and love, right? And nurturance, right? Because life is going to happen. Bad things are going to happen out of our control, but you are always making sure that young people have constant access, right? So that's not necessarily a ritual, but it is a paradigm on development that has its roots in the indigenous world that we, again, could be bringing forward. Just thinking about like new rituals in music and making, or new ideas with art and making, how we tell stories is so important. Absolutely. Right? Where they're shared, how they're shared, who has access to them. It's fascinating to me because, like, in a world that is overly literate, we are relying less and less on storytelling methodology for the keeping of our histories. I guess there's some argument to be made about the role of technology and media and technology, but it's also then about like, well, what stories are we keeping? What stories are we honoring and lifting up? And who gets to do that? I guess there's this interesting like diffused access to storytelling and making in the 21st century that's really dope, and I think allows for this new ritual, or space for new ritual to emerge that's based on old ideas. So one idea in terms of ritual is like before going into battle, many tribes, not just, I was thinking about like, I believe the Zulu warriors, but there's many tribes across the continent of Africa would, right before war, call down their legacy and their lineage, the names of the kings and the warriors of the past, the names of big, important battles, and they would, they would sing them. There would be the loud chanting of it, and it's a group exercise. You know, that's a perfect idea for us to call into our own space, our own ancestors, right? Whether it's musical lineage, it could be neighborhood based. I mean, there are ways for us to bring forward the people who have built us up and the people that we stand on without having to do it in ways that feel stale and old. Like, I let young people make trap sounds. Why can't young people call on who they love and learn about their legacy through trap sounds? Like, that's a judgment call of people who are older. And no disrespect to older folks, because older can even be 10 years older, right? It doesn't mean that you're quote unquote old. It just means that the methodology or the sounds and the things that people are using are just foreign to you, or maybe they just seem too new and it's like weird. But I always remind people that gospel music as we know it, that's the journey it went through. When gospel started sounding like the blues, people were not happy and they did not want those sounds, right? And like it happened slowly over time a bit that those sounds became more and more accepted. So this is just an old pattern for us of like the new sounds kind of scare us. And I just go like, yo, let people express themselves how they need, because the point is to get to the remembrance of the ancestors, or the point is to move the energy, right? I'm
so glad you brought up calling on our ancestors, right? And you mentioned earlier that you once identified as Christian and you're not anymore. And the older that I have gotten, I do identify as Christian, although that has been an interesting journey for me, especially as I've gotten older, and I have come to embrace and really feel the need to, how do I articulate this, to call on ancestors. I feel like within the church there wasn't a lot of talk about ancestry, like, and about our ancestors, and specifically calling on those who have gone before us or who have transitioned into the spiritual realm. It was almost, I felt like, looked at as witchcraft. Yeah, no, absolutely. Right? And I know I was taught that. But it was like, no, the only person you call on is Jesus. You call on God. You call on the Holy Spirit. You don't go calling on your dead grandma. You know, you don't go calling on your family members who have died. And so when it got to a point where, you know, within just a short few years, you know, my grandmother passed, my grandfather passed, my uncle passed, and my goddaughter passed. She was an infant. And losing those folks so quickly, so back to back to back, I found myself, you know, almost every day, like just telling, hey, Grandma, I love you. Grandma Jeannie, you know, calling them by name. Uncle Guy, I love you. You know, Grandpa Ronnie, I love you. Nabariah, I'm thinking, you know, like all of those things. Giving love is witchcraft. I mean, like, that's just But I went through, I did go through a moment where I felt like, I felt that friction between what I had been kind of taught or had observed in the church versus what felt like my soul needed to do, and I needed that connection. And when I started getting to new levels or whatever in life, is like, Grandma, I need you to be with me right now. I would call on my ancestors or my little grandma when I would make my BLT. She taught me how to make them, so when I make those, in my heart, that's still my time with her. Absolutely. But I didn't always feel like that was okay to do. So I'm in a new kind of awakening of like, no, we need to call on our ancestors. That's part of remembrance. Absolutely. So because that which we don't remember, we will forget. Right. And you know, it's interesting, right? Because let's go over 2 seconds since we're talking about ancestry. The Bible
talks about a particular groups of people's ancestry
Yeah,
over and over again. It is interesting. So I almost converted to Judaism years ago. Anybody that knows me well knows that story for me. Like, I love religion. I love spirituality. I love the indigenous world. I love art. Like, I'm all, if I could, I'd be a cultural anthropologist and just go nerd out and travel the world.
Yeah.
But you can't really make money doing that, and I got to survive.
But maybe one day you will.
Maybe one day, right?
Yeah, I'm speaking out for you if that's your heart's desire.
So it's fascinating that when you study Judaism and you look at it from a cultural standpoint, you know, whether or not people believe in the stories, I leave people's belief systems to their own. Like, that's your choice. Go for it. Do what you want. We'll never deny anyone their right to believe what they need to get them to where they're at, and their right to disconnect from it when they need to, right? Like, that's their journey. But it's interesting from just a cultural, like, anthropology-based perspective, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, not just God, is a God of their forefathers, right? They are always, it is not, again, it is not just God. They are always calling upon their ancestral heritage of relationship to God. Right, and that's an interesting perspective to me when I, when I thought about it, because I remember feeling the same way, like, connecting the ancestors. Am I like doing? And then, and then I learned from an Orthodox rabbi. He was like, Michael, we call on our ancestors. We do. It is rooting ourselves in our own cultural practice of faith, because we're here because they've survived. We're here because of their relationship to things larger and bigger than us. And as he was talking to me, I was like, man, that's right. My ancestors did the same. I'm here because they stood and they believed in whatever they had to make it through, and they cried, and they believed in my growth. They believed in my being here and continuing on their legacy, and they believed in our ability to come together and build for the legacy of folks coming after us. And I find that to be such an empowering thing. Like, even talking about it, I have joy and chills. And I feel great. And I just feel like we can. And speaking about social change and human well-being and all those things, like, I feel when I'm connected to that space, like, it's possible. Right? The history of the Village of Arts and Humanities is rooted in that. The original name of that place and space is the Ile Ife Black Humanitarian Center. Ile Ife is Yoruba mythology, right? There was an African dance troupe that a gentleman named Arthur Hall founded out of that space, and they traveled using Yoruba mythology, Yoruba myths to enhance people's sense of identity. Because our identity at one point, you talk about, like, what's not remembered, specifically what's not remembered accurately or remembered in good light, doesn't really get passed on, right? Or you get these weird distorted versions passed on. And so Arthur's big thing with providing open arts and culture access was this, like, bargaining with the neighborhood of Fairhill, like, yo, if you would commit to these classes and experiences in arts and culture to reorganize how you identify, you're not just a descendant of slaves, right? That's not your legacy. That's not who you are. And come experience the remembrance and the newness of that through arts and culture and practice and group-based heritage with each other. I mean, what a fascinating concept. And we're still doing that kind of work today, you know?
Listen, if you're just tuning into this powerful conversation that I'm chatting with Michael O'Brien. He's a program manager at the Village of Arts and Humanities. We've been discussing, trauma therapy, artist healing, new rituals, specifically within the Black community, and how we use art as healing and remember our ancestors and use that as a form of empowerment and embracing and discovering or rediscovering our identity. So we're getting low on time, but if you want to call in really quickly, if you want to jump into this conversation, or you have some thoughts, some feelings, by all means, join the conversation. Our hotline, 215-634-8065. Again, 215-634-8065. You can also call in toll free, 866-361-0900. Again, that's 866-361-0900. We got to get ready to take a break, but when we come back on the other side, just one question I really want to make sure I ask you before I have to, let you go and be great. And that is, what is it like to be a Black man in particular, serving as an advocate for human rights knowing that our people's humanity was denied and quite frankly is still under consistent attack even in this day and age. So want to delve a little bit into that question and your experience as that. So Loves, you're tuned in to the Lounge on WURD Radio 96.1 FM 900 AM. It's 9:40 p.m. We'll be right back after these messages.
Support independent black media and join the onWURD movement now at 215-425-7875 or visit wordradio.com.
At Dietz & Watson, we've spent over 75 years focusing on the details. This can be traced back to our founder, Gottlieb Dietz, who learned how to make franks and sausages the right way in Germany. Today, each one of our delicious offerings is meticulously crafted using perfected details. Because if it isn't good enough for our family, it isn't good enough for yours. To us, the details make all the difference.
Support independent black media and join the onWURD movement now at 215-425-7875 or visit wordradio.com. Word TV. We're streaming live video of this conversation right now. Tune in on YouTube at onWURD or on Facebook at onWURD. Word TV. Black Talk Media. The Lounge with Sincerely Sarita. Sincerely Sarita. Right now on Word Radio.
I'll go through the fire. I'll go through the fire for you. It don't even matter what it requires. I'll go through the fire for you.
It started with Our Father. More than ever, I need you now, Father. Fear don't live far away. Them yesteryears ain't where they are today. Who gon' be the saints of the modern day? Mistakes are tuition that we gotta pay. From whom much is taken, much is cherished. Lord, deliver us, hoping that we get the message.
This diamond is just a stone. This building is just for show. A wonderful piece of paper that put me atop the throne. Going through tribulations, this hunger won't let me go. This hunger won't let me go. This hunger won't let me go. Seeing so many faces that live and die by the cold. I'll go through the fire. I'll go through the fire for you. It don't even matter what it requires. I'll go through the fire for you.
In search of golden wings and a chariot. If Jesus died on the cross, why I gotta carry it? I know the struggle is our heritage. Certain pieces of pain can't be parented. Don't wanna fall in the same place my parents did. The sins of the father inherited. Sometimes I feel my life is an experiment. I'm driven, but God's will is steering it. I focus on the road, heavy as my eyelids. In a world where power is parallel to violence. It won't change if we remain in silence. See it through, look inside for the guidance. Humanity is where the honor and the pride is. For those who can't no more, tears I'ma cry this. Now I decipher who my tribe is and live a life to know what the other side is.
This diamond is just a stone. This building is just for show. A wonderful piece of paper that put me atop the throne. Going through tribulations, this hunger won't let me go. This hunger won't let me go. This hunger won't let me go. I've seen so many faces living there by the cold. I'll go through the fire. I'll go through the fire for you. It don't even matter what it requires.
That's Robert Glasper and Kareem Rickens, The Cross, featuring Leanne La Havas and Common. You're tuned into The Lounge on WURD Radio 96.1 FM 900 AM. Definitely beautiful. Good
Beautiful
vibes on that.
song, man,
Yeah, it's 9:45 p.m. and I have the pleasure, it's been such a great conversation, chatting with Michael O'Brien. He's the program manager at the Village of Arts and Humanities. We've been discussing artist healing, trauma therapy, and his experience we're about to get into of being a black man serving as an advocate for human rights and social change. And so, Mike, prior to break, I kind of set the question up for us to kind of proceed into as we're getting short on time. And so that question is, just to run it back, what is it like to be a black man in particular, serving as an advocate for human rights, knowing that our people's humanity was denied and is under consistent attack even in this day and age?
Yeah. So this is about to go like real meta for me, right? Like I feel very connected to like my ancestors of old, right? Like humans have been on this planet forever. And there was a point, effectively forever, right? And there was a point when the systems that are the root of our decay were not here. And I think about those people a lot. And I think about, at one point there weren't 7.6 to 7.8 billion of us on the planet. It was much, 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 much smaller. And I think about those folks who still, genetically, like we are their offspring. We are their descendants. And so fighting for human rights to me is trying to pull forward ways of thinking about being that might have been more kind, more compassionate, more loving, more caring, more just, that honored the tension of our humanity, right? Like people are going to make mistakes. We're not going to get it right. But what do we do when people don't get it right? Like a quick example of what this means for me is like there was a young man who tried to put his principal in like a wrestling move and had his friend recording it, right? And it didn't go as he planned. And the principal caught him and put him in a headlock. And now the principal's he's not trying to, he's pressing charges, right? For all that he can. And while a friend of mine sent it to me and was like, like we were laughing at it. And then I was thinking about it as I watched the video, and I was like, well, wait a minute now. I was watching a news report. I was like, oh, wait a minute. I'm not sure that throwing the book at this kid to teach him a lesson
is the way
at 18 is the right way to go, right? Like this gets into this concept around restorative justice, right? Like we're going to have some hard questions about our concepts of justice and right and wrong if we want to be restorative and not introduce an 18-year-old, using this example, into the justice system where he can get prosecuted, maybe even do jail time or gets fined and gets some kind of conviction that's weighing over him. And then when 3 years later, it's hard for him to get a job. We're all like, see, the justice system. It's like, well, wait a minute. Maybe there was another option there. Was he wrong? Yes. But in trying to honor the space for his humanity, as it might have been denied him in certain aspects of growth and development, can we hold him accountable? Can we, if people want to use the word punishment, right, or punish, can he be punished, but still not maybe to the extent where it is dragging him for the next 7 to 8 years, right? And that's the
rest of his life.
And that to me, when I think back to our ancestors, at times when they had to figure out hard things, yes, some of it was rough and mean, and we have history of that. But other times, when I think about that idea of inviting the genius out, there is a level of care there too. And so I think there is ripe exploring for, particularly if we all agree that black people, Africa is the cradle of civilization, and there we learned how to live together there is where humanity learned to build its first civilizations. There's a lot of wisdom there that we could be moving forward. And so the work of human rights and social change for me is trying to capture the glory of human collaboration, capture the glory of human compassion, and figure out how in the 21st century we can use that and operationalize with that to really put our attention on a lot of the decay that has been, you know, sewed into the fabric of how our communities are developing. It's not our decay. We didn't make that. Right? We didn't socially engineer redlining, and we didn't socially engineer disease. You know, if anybody wants to get into this stuff, I can drop some quick books. Medical Apartheid is an amazing book. Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome is another amazing book. You know, there's some history that contextualizes how engineered our pain and suffering and intergenerational trauma, how engineered it's been. And on the flip side, we do have the tools to heal. And we have the tools to grow, not just heal, but we have the tools to grow and be great. And people have been doing that for decades and centuries too, and we got to lift that up. That's why it's important we lift up our ancestors, because it's not all been degradation. It's, even though we've had an onslaught of chaos coming against us, and this can be said for so many other communities that are black and brown. So that to me is a space of like organizing as a black man in this crazy old chaotic world.
And I mean, just hats off and love and light to you, you know, as you do this really important work. And I mean, just even sitting here having this conversation with you has, you know, within myself, I feel healing, and I haven't quite been able to put my hand on it, but just even the affirmation of like how communicating with our ancestors and that being okay, and knowing that that's a practice that I've been doing, but I've been becoming more intentional and having that conversation about it, and then being open about saying that. So just even being able to have that conversation with you, this conversation with you, I appreciate.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, yeah. And also thank you for these book suggestions. So if you missed it, some books, because I was trying to like type them down as he was saying them. The Healing Wisdom of Africa. Yep. Right. That's one book that we encourage you all to check out. And this is all getting added to my reading list. Of the Water and Spirit.
Yeah, of the Water and the Spirit.
Of the Water and the Spirit. Medical Apartheid.
Yeah, Medical Apartheid. That's a heavy book.
It sounds like
it looks at policy. Like, if you think Tuskegee's bad, this country has a history of doing this through universities, medical schools, and it's documented all in this one book, and it's intense.
Gotcha. Yeah. And then Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome.
Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome by a woman named Joy DeGrasse is a really good one. Anybody wants to get into trauma, there's two books I'd recommend. One is The Body Keeps the Score. That book is a tour de force. And there's a really interesting one written kind of investigative journalism style called The Boy Who Was Raised as a Dog. But they'll give you some really great insights. Last book recommendation, Restoring Sanctuary. If you really want to get into like some of the healing from like a little bit of a clinical end and like a group kind of operationalized system side. What could families do? What could organizations do? Restoring Sanctuary is a really good one for that.
All right. Well, listen, we have been chatting, or I have been chatting with, but you've been in this too.
Thank you for listening.
Michael O'Brien, Program Manager at the Village of Arts and Humanities. So for folks who, want to follow your journey and your work, support however they can, let them know where to find you at and how to connect with you.
Yeah, so my email is real simple. It's mike@villagearts.org. You can check out the Village at villagearts.org. I'm on Twitter at Mystic Quest. That's Mystic with an I because somebody had it with a Y. So at MISTIC Quest, QUEST. I'm on Facebook, just my name, Michael O'Brien, O''BRYAN. I have cool ancestors into the Celtic stuff, with a good old Y. But that's how you can generically follow me.
Okay. Yeah. And run that email back again for some folks.
Yeah, mike@villagearts.org. Make sure you put that S on the end. It is villagearts.org.
Okay. All right, there we have it. Thank you so much, Mike.
No problem.
And loves, it's about that